This question comes from Rebecca, who asks, what if the sun suddenly turned green? My question for Rebecca, are we talking just the color, or are we also repainting physics along with it? Because if the sun only looked green, that would be one thing. But if the sun actually started emitting green light instead of its usual spectrum, that's a very different and much more interesting problem. Let's start with the simple version. If the sun suddenly appeared green in the sky, like someone just applied a giant Instagram filter, nothing else would really change physically. Sunlight would still contain all wavelengths. It would just be shifted in a way that our eyes interpret as green. The world would look strange. Shadows would take on a faint green tint. The sky might look darker, slightly more eerie. Sunsets would turn into these unsettling greenish-yellow gradients that feel a little less end of a beautiful day and a little more something is not right. Plants, interestingly, might not mind as much as you think. Despite being green, plants don't actually prefer green light. They mostly absorb red and blue wavelengths for photosynthesis. So if the sunlight spectrum shifted heavily toward green, plants would actually become less efficient. Crops would grow slower, forests would thin over time, ecosystems would start to feel the strain, but that's still the mild version. Now let's talk about the version where the sun doesn't just look green, it actually becomes a green-emitting star. To do that, the sun's surface temperature would need to change. Stars emit different colors depending on how hot they are. Our sun is currently around 5,500 degrees Celsius at the surface, which produces that familiar white-yellow light. To shift toward green, the sun would need to move its peak emission into a narrower wavelength band, and stars don't really like doing that. They don't casually pick a new color like choosing a shirt in the morning. A true green star would require a very specific and unnatural emission pattern, something that doesn't happen under normal stellar physics. So if the sun suddenly became purely green, it would mean something deeper had changed, something fundamental, and that's where things start to go wrong. If the sun's energy output changed along with its color, even slightly, Earth would notice almost immediately. Within minutes, satellites would detect anomalies in solar radiation. Within hours, temperature patterns would begin to shift. If the sun were emitting less total energy, the planet would begin cooling. Not instantly, but steadily. Days would feel colder, nights would bite harder. Weather systems would start behaving unpredictably. Within weeks, growing seasons would shorten. Within months, food production would begin to drop. And within a few years, large parts of the planet could face serious ecological stress. But let's go the other direction. If the sun's color shift came with more energy instead of less, now we have the opposite problem. Oceans would begin warming faster. Ice caps would melt at accelerated rates. Atmospheric circulation would intensify. Storms would grow stronger, more frequent, more chaotic. The kind of changes that normally take centuries, compressed into decades. And all of this started with something as simple as the sun turning green. But there's an even stranger possibility, because color is tied not just to temperature but to how light is distributed across wavelengths. If the sun's output narrowed heavily into green wavelengths, the total usable energy for life could actually decrease, even if the brightness looked similar, which means Earth could look bright but feel cold, a world lit in green but slowly losing its warmth. Now let's zoom out a little further, because from space a green sun would stand out immediately. Stars are categorized by their color and temperature. Red dwarfs, yellow stars like our sun, blue giants, but green doesn't fit. Astronomers across the galaxy, if there are any, would look at our star and realize something is off. It would be like finding a tree that glows purple in a forest where every other tree is green. Unnatural, suspicious, worth investigating. And over longer timescales, if this color shift reflected a deeper instability in the sun's core, then we're not just talking about climate changes anymore. We're talking about stellar evolution going off script. Because stars don't just change color without changing their life cycle. And when a star starts behaving unpredictably, it usually means it's heading toward a transition. Not tomorrow, not next year, but eventually. And eventually, in cosmic terms, comes faster than you'd like. Billions of years from now, our sun is expected to expand into a red giant, swallowing Mercury, Venus, and possibly Earth. But if something caused it to turn green prematurely, it could mean that timeline has been altered, shifted, or worse, accelerated. So the real answer to Rebecca's question depends on what kind of green we're talking about. If it's just a visual change, then life goes on under a slightly unsettling sky, If it's a physical change in how the sun emits energy, then Earth enters a slow, quiet crisis. And if it's a sign that the sun itself has started breaking the rules of stellar physics, then the color change is not the problem. It's the warning, and the sky turning green might be the least concerning part of what comes next.